Robert here, and welcome to episode 22 of Monthly Submission Rankings, where I rank tracks that you submit to me every single month. And for this episode, I'm going to be ranking your favorite album closers. You know, if we have done an episode on album openers, then surely we can do the same thing for album closers too. While some of these tracks don't leave the listener on a high note, others follow the assignment and do it perfectly. And that's not only another thing that makes albums as special as they are, but it's also evident in the quality of your submissions. 27 people submitted to this episode, which is the second most amount of participants ever in this series. And because 3 of the songs were submitted to me by 2 people each, this equated to 24 songs for me to cover and not 27. And that's honestly still good considering the fact that this is a bit more than the last episode as well. And much like the previous 2 episodes, y'all really submitted some dang good songs. And I can't wait to talk about all 24 tracks in this video. No disqualifications this time, so let's get on with the disclaimers. Like usual, y'all know the drill. This ranking is just my own subjective opinion, and it's all based on how much I enjoyed these songs as a whole. Remember not to take this very seriously, because at the end of the day, we're all here to have fun. Also, don't feel bad if your submission didn't do too well in particular, because the competition for this one, for the most part, was rough. Trust me. This ranking is also not necessarily final, as some songs may have the potential to grow or shrink on me more than others. If you have any feedback for the series, whether it be positive or negative in a constructive way, feel free to leave it down in the comments. So yeah, I have nothing much to say. Now without any further ado, this is Monthly Submission Rankings, episode 22, your favorite album closers. Enjoy! Number 24, Doki y sus amigos, Expresión. This song sure is, interesting. Turns out we have another song from a kid's show to talk about, this time being Doki, which I've never watched. But yeah, I don't think I have a lot of things to talk about this one. In fact, I don't have a lot of nice things to say about it either, because this song is not that very good. To start, the vocals are very annoying, especially the vocals at the beginning that make me cringe every time I hear it. And even if I ignore the vocals altogether, the production is super bland and one-dimensional with absolutely nothing for me to latch onto. I'm sure there's an audience for this type of stuff, and I won't get mad at you if you like this, but for me, this is extremely not my thing, and this is unfortunately the first song I've covered here since I started writing scripts for these videos that I've actually properly hated. Hard pass. Number 23, The Aquabats, Don't Stop. And now we move on to American rock band The Aquabats, who made their own show that aired on the Hub Network called The Aquabats Super Show. Just like with Doki, I never watched this show, so I give this one its first play out of context, and, well, okay, it's not the worst thing I've heard or anything, but I think this is still mediocre, all things considered. Let me start with some actually positive things I have for this song. I will give this song credit for the vocals, as the lead singer in particular delivers as much enthusiasm as he can, and they're not as annoying as the previous track I talked about. However, the not so positive thing about this song is the upbeat and peppy rock instrumentation, which feels a little too generic for my liking. Overall, another song that really isn't for me, but again, to be fair, I do get the appeal of this, and it's not the worst thing ever like I said earlier. Regardless, I'd still skip it. Number 22, Diego, Dora and Friends, Joy to the World. Oh boy, here we go again with another song from shows whose main demographic I'm not a part of at all. This time being Dora the Explorer and Go Diego Go, which, I mean, it makes sense since Dora and Diego are canonically cousins, but yeah, this is getting a little ridiculous with these kinds of songs. Like, what do you want me to review next? The I Love You song from Barney and Friends? Anyways, this song is better than I was expecting, but is it passable? Honestly, no, not really. The thing I don't necessarily enjoy about this song is how generic the sound of this song is, and how great it can get sometimes from my point of view. So with all that negative criticism out of the way, one might ask, hey Robert, what makes this song better than the previous 2 submissions? Well, here's my answer. At least there are elements to the song that I found to be more interesting, including that nice electric piano intro, as well as a catchier melody to speak of, which allows the song to have more of a sing-along kind of feel to it, and that's something I can sort of appreciate. All in all, it's not really a good song, but at least it has a bit of good ideas here and there that prevent this from being entirely the worst song on this list. Number 21, Donho, Du Chua Noi. Seems like we can't go one episode without a Via pop song, huh? Anyways, my thoughts are pretty much the same as Woy Tin Tram Tam from the previous episode. Pretty meh. My main issue with this one is that it's kind of boring and repetitive. I'll give it some props for the chord progression on this one, as it gives the song more of a somber feel to it. Furthermore, Donho's vocals are pretty solid and sound pretty at certain points, and the twinkly sounding melodies as well as some guitars and backing vocals also sound pretty, giving the track a bit more personality. What ruins this for me though is the production and mixing, as the percussion kind of sounds a bit MIDI programmed to me, and much like Woin Tin Tram Nam, the synths sound very cheap to the point where it takes me out of the emotion of the song, which is a real shame. Even though it works alright as a closer to the same Vietnamese Top 51 Hits compilation as the last episode, it's not really anything special on its own. Again, it's sad because I wanted to like this more, but it's just yet another middle-of-the-road Viet pop song for me. Next. Number 20. Tyler, the Creator, Cindy Lou's Wish. Now here's where we get into the more passable stuff, starting with the series first. Talking about one of the most iconic rappers out there right now, Tyler, the Creator, and his track Cindy Lou's Wish, the closing track to his 2018 Gritch EP, which to me is unfortunately a bit of a mess. And that's saying a lot, because I usually consider Tyler's later period work to be worth people's time, as Flower Boy, Igor, and Call Me If You Get Lost are all really great albums at the very least that people should check out if they haven't done so already. That said, despite me not liking this Grinch EP nearly to the same extent as those three albums, I think Cindy Lou's Wish is a decent enough closer. I like the sound of the synths that contrast well with some twinkling melodies to give the track a whole lot of Christmas vibes, and the jingle bells in the second half of the track really do paint the listener into that Christmas sound pretty well. But that's really all there is to it. It doesn't really flesh itself out all too well aside from adding a nice string section towards the end of it, and given that it's only a minute long, it doesn't really require much more discussion than that. Otherwise, I think it's okay. Check it out if you're curious. Number 19. Kanye West, Who Will Survive in America? You thought me talking about Tyler, the Creator was surreal? How about someone that no one has talked about before? Kanye West. I'm just kidding, because not only is he one of the most well-known, best-selling, and talked about artists of all time, but he is also quite the interesting individual when it comes to his outspoken views and the controversies he's gotten himself into, and I will absolutely not be getting into those. However, I will be diverting my attention to his fifth album from 2010, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. And while I didn't enjoy the album as much as many other people seem to, I thought it was pretty solid for what it was, featuring songs like Power that I actually really liked a lot. And the closing track, Who Will Survive in America, while it's not one of my biggest favorites from the album overall, I think it's pretty decent for what it is. According to Genius, it's, quote, an abridged version of Gil Scott-Heron's comment number 1 that paints a bleak outlook for Kanye's future, end quote. I'm not going to dive too deeply into much of the lyrics here, but I'm really intrigued by the repetition of the lyric Who Will Survive in America towards the end of the song, where it seems to have a double meaning. The first one being linked to the poem itself and its messages about the African-American experience and the faded idealism of the American dream, and the second one being directly related to the album's message, as the question seems to imply that the obsession with fame will ultimately be the end to us all. On top of that, the production is pretty good, and the way the piece was sampled into the song was neatly employed. And it goes along really well with some organs, bongos, and a cool bass guitar. Overall, it's a pretty decent to good song. While I wish the ideas of this track were further fleshed out of context, considering its short 90+ second runtime, I think it does a good job of wrapping the album up in context. Cool stuff. Number 18. DJ Seinfeld, You. And now I move on to the properly good stuff. And some of you may be shocked by this placement because I did see some love for this track when I posted the list of songs that I was going to be talking about on the community tab, but I promise you, I think this is really good. DJ Seinfeld is a producer from Sweden who is the owner of the Young Ethics record label, and the track we're going to be talking about is You, which acts as a really good closing track to his 2017 album, Time Spent Away from You. First off, I think he did a really good job on the production front with this thing, as I feel like it has some 90s-ish house aesthetics that allow it to stand out in a distinctive way without it feeling like nostalgia bait. It kind of reminds me of Sclitch's non-album single, Translucent, which is pretty funny since Sclitch himself actually submitted You to me. And that's completely ignoring the emotive and evocative pianos and synths that not only make the track stand out even more, but also have some life and personality to it as well. I also like the little breakdown 2.5 minutes in before a neat vocal sample appears at the 3-minute mark too. It all sounds neat. All in all, even though there are small moments where I felt like the track kinda dragged a bit over its 6-minute run, at the same time, I can confirm that this track is really likable, and I recommend giving this a listen for anyone looking into DJ Seinfeld for the first time. Number 17. Sebastian Wman. Oh, well what do you know? French musician Sebastian is back. Although this time it's not a track from Total like it was in episode 20, instead it's a track from his 2006 EP, Ross, Wman. Is it better than Arabesque though? No. But is it good on its own? Yes. For starters, I like the hard-hitting beats and the bass on this one that give it such a nice groove. I also really like the small little switch ups throughout this track, especially at the 113 mark where the bass line is kind of different from how it was at the beginning of the song, and it goes along really well with some other small vocal samples that also make it work. To me, this whole track wouldn't feel out of place on an album like Justice's Cross, for example, where it shares a lot of common characteristics with a lot of the tracks from that album, including not just a nice bass line and a distinct punch, but also some gritty and distorted electro house textures. In a way, since this EP was released a year prior to Cross, it's kind of like Cross Era Justice before Cross Era Justice. Overall, despite me liking this a bit less than Not a Best from 2 episodes ago, as previously stated, it doesn't stop me from saying that this track is really solid all things considered. I like this a lot. Number 16. Bruce Springsteen, Jungle Land. From a fairly behind-the-scenes producer, we move on to one of the most enigmatic singer-songwriters in rock music, Bruce Springsteen, who is very well known for albums like this one, Born to Run, where it sees him changing up his style as an attempt to make it into the mainstream. And personally, I really enjoyed the record a lot. Probably my favorite album of his, if I'm being honest. I think its romanticized American themes combined with his striking rock and roll sound and his passionate vocals just make for a very well executed record. And I also think that this closing track, Jungle Land, is a grand 9.5-minute culmination of all that. I am not only very pleased with his vocals on this one, especially towards the end of the track where he kind of goes for a more spoken word approach, but the overall dynamics of the song are really well done, especially with the pianos and strings going up against the rock instrumentation throughout the majority of this that do go for a perfectly larger-than-life sound. And the lyrics are consistently well written on top of it. The first verse sees him singing about the Vietnam War, and the first two lines, "The Rangers had a homecoming in Harlem late last night," really do provide the listener with brilliant imagery that pertains to serving the war. He also sings about kids breaking out in the second verse as implied by the lines, "And the kids round here look just like shadows, always quiet, holding hands." He also provides some more interesting imagery and metaphors in the third verse, as the fifth line in this verse, "Man, there's an opera out on the turnpike," really did provide a sense of intrigue, as this obviously references the New Jersey Turnpike. He also discusses the urban underworld in the first two lines of verse 4. "The streets alive as secret debts are paid, contacts made, they vanished unseen." And the first two lines on the bridge provide even more interesting imagery. "In the parking lot, the visionaries dress in the latest rage. Inside, the Backstreet Girls are dancing to the records that the DJ plays." It's especially a legitimately good set of lines when you realize that the parking lot that he's referring to here is connected to the urban jungle that he just so happened to mention in the first verse. The final two verses are where the song really shines. In the penultimate verse, he sings about lovemaking as evident by the line, "Soul engines running through a night so tender." And that's pretty clever wordplay since, according to Genius, the engines in Born to Run are always loud and powerful, symbolizing youthful vibrancy and passion. The final verse wraps the song up in a very nice fashion as Springsteen sings about his era and nuances of life's monotony with the lines, "Between what's flesh and what's fantasy, and the poets down here don't write nothing at all. They just stand back and let it all be." God, I went too deep into this whole song, but it doesn't prevent me from calling this one of my favorites off of Born to Run, and one of Bruce Springsteen's better songs in my opinion when it comes to dynamics and his overall songwriting capabilities. Great song. Number 15. Taylor Swift, Begin Again. This song got the number 15 spot, and so did State of Grace from the last episode. Given that they're both from the same album, I do kind of sense a bit of deja vu with this one, but I digress. I think it's a very satisfying closer to Red. Instrumentally, the song is pretty, lush, sweet, and gentle on the ears, and Taylor Swift delivers one of her most intimate and personal vocal performances yet. The songwriting on this thing further elevates this song for me, as she expresses her hope for a budding relationship while reflecting on romantic mistakes, ending the album on an optimistic note. In the first verse, she illustrates how her ex was uncomfortable with her being strong-willed and powerful as implied by the first three lines. "Took a deep breath in the mirror, he didn't like it when I wore high heels, but I do." Damn, her sense of imagery is good. She then compares her new love interest to her old lover in the second verse with the lines, "I walked in expecting you to be late, but you got here early and you stand and wave." The chorus is where things get more interesting, so we have quite a bit of breaking down to do here. The first line, "And you throw your head back laughing like a little kid," sees her having an affection towards little kids, and that's followed up with the line, "I think it's strange that you think I'm funny, cause he never did," which, according to Genius, references both I Bet You Think About Me and All Too Well 10-minute version. The next two lines, "I've been spending the last 8 months thinking all love ever does is break and burn and end," supposedly refers to the subject of the song being the frontman of Parachute, Will Anderson. The third verse of the song references the inspiration for Taylor's name, James Taylor, with the lines, "You said you never met one girl who's had as many James Taylor records as you, but I do." The second to last part of the song to break down is the bridge, where Swift comes to the realization that her previous relationship isn't worth harping on anymore, especially with the last line, "and for the first time, what's past is past." Lastly, we have the outro, where she sings, "But on a Wednesday, in a cafe, I watched it begin again," which is also sung at the end of the chorus. And with this lyric being the final one on Red, isn't a genius way for her to encourage people to replay the record, making this album in a way go full circle. Yep, that was a lot to unpack here, but simultaneously, I think this is not just my favorite song on Red, as well as being what I consider to be a showcase of the album's strengths, but also a demonstration of Taylor Swift's strengths as a singer-songwriter too. This is great. One of my favorite songs from hers thus far. Number 14, Aaker, Second Peng. Dang, it's been a while since I last did a dedicated video on these guys, hasn't it? Aaker, or Autechre, or Oweyatikahuri, or whatever you want to call them, consisting of Sean Booth and Rob Brown, are an interesting British electronic music duo, to say the least. And that's not to say I dislike them, because at the end of the day, I do happen to actually like them a lot, and consider the majority of their music to be at least worth hearing, especially with albums like Nebula, Triripide, Untilted, Chorustus, and Xi being as great as they are. And even though their music can sometimes be an acquired taste with albums like LSEC 1 through 5 and NTS Sessions 1 through 4 aiming for long periods of time, I cannot deny the impact they've made on the IDM scene of the 1990s either, although Booth has been openly dismissive about the term, but whatever. Again, this duo is legitimately good. That said, I've only listened to their mainline studio albums at this point and nothing else. So it was my first time listening to Second Peng, the closer to the 1995 EP, Anvil Vapor. And after giving it its first play, I will admit that it is one of their more underappreciated tracks. I like the way it starts with some minimal sounding hi-hats going up against some spooky pads that convey such a dystopian atmosphere. I also really like the inclusion of some industrial kicks and echoing snares that last throughout the majority of this, as well as some melodies that pop into the mix later on down the line that also add on to the atmosphere it's trying to create quite well. Not really much more I can add to this because of how the track moves at a fairly slow pace throughout its 10 plus minutes, but whenever it's on, I always tend to find myself enjoying the sounds and textures the duo essentially employ on this thing. I fuck with it. Number 13, Oasis, The Master Plan. And now to move on to a British former rock band who needs no introduction at all, Oasis. They've released songs like Wonderwall and Don't Look Back in Anger, which are both Britpop classics at this point. As a matter of fact, they were a band that defined the term Britpop along with bands like Blur, Suede, and Pulp. But the song I'm going to be talking about here is The Master Plan, the 1995 B-side to Wonderwall that eventually appeared on the 1998 compilation album The Master Plan as the closing track, so yeah, that's why it's here. But man, this song is also great. Holy shit. Probably just as good, if not even better than Wonderwall or Don't Look Back in Anger if I'm being honest. Not only does Noel Gallagher deliver a really passionate vocal performance throughout all of this, but the slow drumming and guitar work contrasting well with beautiful strings just make for some stellar instrumentation from front to back. And once again, the songwriting on this is really well executed. According to Gallagher in an interview, the line, "and cast your words away upon the waves," means the airwaves. Which to me is clever because with the waves part of the line, many people are gonna think it's the ocean waves when in reality it's really the airwaves. Also, the line, "say it loud and sing it proud today," is a line that feels like it will stick with me for a long while. The chorus is what really shines for me though, as he also says in an interview that the lyrics in this part of the song are about the fear of growing old, and I suppose it's evident by the lines, "please brother let it be, life on the other hand won't make us understand, we're all part of a master plan." Finally, some references can be found in the second verse, as there seems to be a double meaning for the line, "the answer's in the looking glass," according to Genius. It's supposedly a reference to A, Looking Glass, the last track on the Lost self-titled album, or B, The Beatles' Looking Glass, an unreleased instrumental song that was recorded during the Get Back sessions of 1969. The following two lines, "there's 4 and 20 million doors on life's endless corridor," were written because Gallagher wrote the song while the band was touring Japan, noting that the hotel they stayed at had long corridors with plenty of rooms, which is once again really interesting imagery. All in all, this song is not just great lyrically and compositionally, it's also a great showcase of what the sound of Britpop had to offer. Gallagher himself even said that this was one of his best written songs, and yeah, I can safely say that it shows. Probably my favorite track of theirs to date. And just like that, we have finally made it to the halfway point of the list. And guys, this is where we get into some truly fantastic stuff right here. And what a better way to start that off than with number 12, Former Hero, Viaduct. And here we have another British music producer to talk about. Whoa, deja vu. Anyway, some of you may recall my inclusion of what I believe to be his full-length debut album, Footpaths, on my 2021 year-end list, and Viaduct is one of the key reasons why. Like, this track is incredible. Like, seriously incredible. I am absolutely captivated by the melodies on this one too, especially with the beautiful piano melody at the beginning of this thing. Furthermore, the house production is just as stellar as ever, and that metal part in the second half of the song too, fucking lord, it's all so good. It really wraps up both the song and the whole album in such a glorious yet raw and aggressive fashion, it's not even funny. And to further add on to the list of good things to say about this track, I feel as though the fairly vulnerable lyrics that he writes really make the song have such a personality and edge that I don't find in many songs like this, especially when it comes to electronic music itself. It's almost like if Porter Robinson turned emo during the creation of Nurture, and you know you're doing something right when even I am comparing Viaduct to the sound of my favorite album of the 2020s so far in a positive light like this. It does make sense since both Footpads and Nurture made my 2021 year-end list, but I digress. Overall, this track is what I really love in Former Heroes music, and then some. This is really something special. Go give this one a spin, and given that he released his second and final album, Means to an End, not too long ago, I also want to say thank you for everything, Former Hero. It's tracks like this that are the reason why your music has meant a lot to so many people, including myself. And I wish you the best of luck with your future endeavors, whether it be a new alias or something else. Again, thank you so much for creating this track and for the wonderful talent that you have brought to the table with your Former Hero alias. Number 11, Mr. Bungle, Goodbye Sober Day. And just like that, we go from emotionally hard-hitting stuff to just straight-up freakish material. Next up is Mr. Bungle, an American experimental rock band who have cycled through several music genres including heavy metal, avant-garde jazz, ska, disco, and funk. So yeah, pretty eclectic style to say the least. But man, what is there even to say about Goodbye Sober Day? The closing track to their third album, California, from 1999. It's so noisy and so manic and so chaotic and so psychotic and so borderline creepy at certain points. It's like I'm watching The Nightmare Before Christmas if the plot centered around Jack Skellington going on a cruise. Weird analogy, I know, but this is what this track feels like to me. This song discusses heroin addiction, alternating between a gloomy first-person narrative and a pitiful but snide third-person narrative. And I'd say the lyrics really do convey these two narratives quite well, especially with these first 4 lines where the narrator feels conflicted between what others tell him and the desire he feels for the drugs. But dude, don't even get me started on the instrumentation itself, as I really do appreciate how they went for a more tropical sound while also putting in their own spooky and odd spin on top of it that makes the track sound so stylistically them. And that's most prevalent towards the beginning. I also think it's clever how at the 38-second mark they go from that upbeat tropical sound to a more slower yet ever so slightly relaxing vibe. And that makes for a great addition to an already chaotic song. What happens later on is absolutely insane, where you get this unique sounding choir 2 minutes in, with lyrics that describe events that are associated with the apocalypse. And that scatting at the 2:41 mark? God, it sounds so good. Jesus Christ almighty. Especially when it goes up against the whole rock instrumentation, it goes so incredibly hard that I am really just in awe of it at this point. And the way this song ends with a barrage of additional scary sounds is a bit harrowing. It kind of ends California the same way Banachek ends 808 States Don Solars, where it's like you think they're gonna end on a lighthearted note, but nope, we're gonna go all out. And Mr. Bungle certainly did it here. Yeah, I don't think I have anything else to say beyond that. It's truly one of the craziest rock songs I have ever heard. I can say with a hand on my heart. Number 10, Mild Soro Integrated, Soul 7.20 Sunbathing Dog Mix. And we're kicking the top 10 off with a 2023 gem. Mild Soro Integrated is an electronic music producer from Argentina who came out with a new album this year called Variety List, which was not only made as a tribute to his late dog who sadly passed away last year, but it's also my new favorite album of 2023 so far, even eclipsing Reed Willis' Sediment. How do people do this, man? It's crazy. But yeah, this whole record, in my opinion, is absolutely stunning, and I think the closer Soul 7.20 Sunbathing Dog Mix is both one of the highlights and simultaneously the most heart-wrenching track of the whole bunch. Losing a pet is like losing a family member. There's no other way to cut it. So if this whole album is dedicated to his dog, then this track is like watching that dog cross that rainbow bridge. Just the way these ambient pats swell with the sense of overwhelming warmth to it, it's literally the dictionary definition of heaven. And those alluring strains contrasting well with some hard melodies that pop into the mix a little later on only adds to the atmosphere of this track in such a remarkable way. There's not really much going on throughout 6.5 minutes, but at the end of the day, that's really all you need. Instrumentally, it really says a whole lot when it comes to this album's overall purpose without really saying a whole lot. It's like 2023's very own Stone and Focus. Or, if you're sick of me mentioning that track for the bajillionth time, I also think of how the track ends the album in the same exact way as Farewell Fire ends the Campfire Head phase, where most of the tracks on that album were really uplifting and welcoming, whereas the last track sounded sad and mournful while also retaining that same overlying warmness. And that's what I feel like is also happening with Variety List. This is a fantastic ambient number all around, and one of my favorite tracks of 2023 to be sure. Check it out when you get the chance, and check out the whole album too. It really is something special. Number 9. Metallica, The Call of Cthulhu. Surprise! Another sharp 180-degree turn for this list. This time we're switching to the heavy metal stuff again, and for this episode we have Metallica, one of, if not the most iconic heavy metal band ever. They also found commercial success with the release of 1986's Master of Puppets, which has been cited by many fans and critics alike to be their best album to date. And I pretty much agree. However, we're instead going to be shifting our gears to the album that preceded this, Ride the Lightning, which is proof that this band is more than just the obvious classic that is Master of Puppets. And The Call of Cthulhu, which, fun fact, is the only instrumental on this album, is an example of that. I think it demonstrates their knack for creating some dang good melodies super well across the entire track, and on top of it, the track's overall dynamics are really something to behold. I love how this track starts with a really cool guitar melody, and the way the drums also come in is pretty dope all around. And goddammit, the way the track ends with this huge crescendo at the 8:43 mark is genuinely unbelievable. It really just hits you like a freight train. And yeah, I don't have anything else to say about this track other than this is excellent, and one of their best individual tracks from my perspective. Metal is so rad, man. Number 8. Alexander Panos, Returning. Funny how I gave a little mention to Nascent in the previous episode, and now all of a sudden I get a chance to talk about the closing track in this episode. That's nice. Anyways, as some of you may remember, Alexander Panos' debut album Nascent made my 2022 year-end list, standing behind Vale Smith's Chorus Gate as my favorite album of that year, and for very good reason. Sound design-wise, this album is nothing short of unique. And on top of that, the themes of changing that the album explores, coupled with the brilliant writing that is being displayed throughout, made for one of the best experiences I've had with electronic music this decade. I was just floored by this album's amazing presentation across this album's 10 tracks, and Returning is still one of my favorites from this album for dang sure. The melodies on this track are still transcendent as all hell, and Alexander singing on this track is still beautiful and hits me in the feels. Moreover, the vocoders, the piano integrations, the synth passages, and that orchestral part that takes up the last minute of the track, just everything about it is straight up gorgeous. And it also works as a grand culmination of everything that made Nascent as beautiful and as distinguishable as it was. This track is simply like finding a light at the end of the tunnel and suddenly realizing that everything will be alright in the end. It's also like floating across the highest heights in all of heaven while beautiful guardian angels get ready to take me home to paradise. I still love this track to death, and the fact that this is not even my favorite track on the album just speaks volumes to the quality of not just Nascent, but also the quality of Alexander's music in general. This is really just exquisite. Number 7. Craftwork, Om Sweet Om. Yep, now we're moving on to some real game changers, are we? I think it goes without saying that Craftwork are the most influential group in the history of electronic music. No contest. Remember when I said in the previous episode that I was unsure of what electronic music as we know it would sound like without Aphex Twin and the selected ambient works projects? Well, on the other hand, I don't think electronic music as a whole would exist without a helping of these legends from Germany. I'm still amazed by how well a lot of their music has aged over the course of 5+ decades at this point, with albums like Audubon, The Man Machine, Computer World, and Tour de France soundtracks still going down as absolute classics. But here we have Radioactivity, and despite me thinking that it doesn't beat any of those albums from equality-wise, I still think it's a pretty fun record with plenty of standouts to be found. And Om Sweet Om is right up there with Airwaves as my favorite track on the LP. To me, this is probably one of the most reflective sounding tracks to date, immediately starting with computerized vocals staying the title of the track because of course, and then a little later on we get some low-key and innocent sounding synths, as well as some mechanical noises and a beautiful melody, and that's all happening before we get a simple yet effective beat around 2 minutes or so. Which sort of gives me the impression that this track served as inspiration for Daft Punk to make the track Make Love from their Human After All album, as I feel the beat itself reminds me a lot of that track. Also, I really love that flute melody towards the end, as it makes this track feel all the more magical. On average, this is a seriously phenomenal closing track, and one of my favorites from Craftwork in general. Awesome stuff. Number 6. Moby, My Weakness. And the classics keep on coming. American musician and animal rights activist Richard Melville Hall, aka Moby, is considered by many to be one of the most vital dance music figures of the early 90s, helping bring dance music to the mainstream in both the US and the UK. I myself like a lot of his music, with Play being my easy favorite album he's done. Now, Play is an album that is more of a return to form to his electronica roots, unlike its predecessor Animal Rights, where he deviated from those styles and embraced a more alternative rock, industrial rock, and hardcore punk approach to his music. Play also has a lot of Moby's best tracks to date in my opinion, including Natural Blues, Everloving, Southside, Why Does My Heart Feel So Bad, and of course, Porcelain. But then there's My Weakness, and while it isn't my favorite track on the album entirely, it's also still one of the most emotionally striking tracks on it regardless. First off, I think it's brilliant how we took a Kanak choir loop and manipulated to make the sample say, weekly mind, ooh, I go home, which really fits well with this track's overall vibes and also living up to its title. Second, the orchestration is so uplifting beyond belief. The piano integration in this is pretty grand. The overall dynamics of the string sections that take up the bulk of the track are really just something else. It reminds me a lot of the music from Sam Raimi's Spider-Man movie trilogy, and that's a gigantic compliment. I described Soul 7.20 Sunbathing Dog Mix and Returning from earlier as tracks that make me feel like I'm in heaven, but this one is like Heaven 2.0 or something. I don't know what else to say about this one, other than that it's another one of those simple but effective type tracks, and I will absolutely take it. Fantastic. Number 5, Aphex Twin, Matchsticks. This is funny because I mentioned this guy quite a few times throughout the video, and guess what? We're gonna be talking about him again! Anyways, Aphex Twin needs no introduction at this point, at least I hope, because as I said earlier, he pretty much changed electronic music forever with 85 to 92, and especially with this one, Solve 2, which is still my third favorite album of all time, and one of only 5 albums I've heard that I would give the prestigious 10 out of 10 score to. To me, this album does an amazing job at mentally taking me from one place to the next, while also acting as this gigantic soup of emotions ranging from warm and welcoming cuts like Rhubarb, Lycan, and Stone and Focus, to some pretty dark cuts like Tree, White Blur 1, and Blue Calcs, to some weird and mysterious cuts like the track I'm about to discuss, Matchsticks, which is still to this day one hell of a closer and one of my favorite tracks he's ever made. Much like the rest of the tracks on the album, I absolutely love the atmosphere on this one, as the cosmic synth textures being backed up by this really cool chord progression throughout is just insanely good. It really just has that perfectly dramatic and spooky vibe that has me sold from the second I press play on this one. It's really the closest RDJ has ever gotten to soundtracking a literal movie about being abducted by aliens. And yeah, I mean, I don't agree with the sentiment about Aphex Twin being this do-no-wrong type artist all the time, as I don't think every single release by him is a winner or anything like that. Not every track he's made is perfect, High Ventolin and Started Zooming to go on, but Matchsticks truly is. It's just another example of Solve 2 creating the atmosphere its tracks are going for magnificently, and it's also one of many instances of the magic his music can truly hold. Phenomenal track for sure. Number 4. The Doors, Riders on the Storm. Switching back to rock for this one, and man, very few tracks in this genre sound as ghostly, psychedelic, and jazzy as this one. Anyways, this closing song to the 1971 album LA Woman was the last one before the sudden and unfortunate passing of lead singer Jim Morrison, and you know what? I actually like this more than Light My Fire. This is 100% my favorite song of theirs to date, and that's saying a lot. Before we get to the main thing that makes the song amazing, let me just start with the lyrics, which are smartly written, and I'd even argue that it does well at reflecting Morrison's life. In the chorus, the lines, "Into this house we're born, into this house we're thrown," feel like relatable lines from my point of view, as everything is alright when you're a little baby, but you're thrown into the world, as it were, once you go through a little growing up and maturing. Also, the Riders on the Storm and An Actor Out on Loan lines have pretty important meanings, as the former refers to when Morrison would consider himself a writer on the storm, while the latter refers to when actors would be loaned between studios, not by their choice and not having much to say for it. The Killer on the Road line in the first verse serves as a reference to a screenplay he wrote called The Hitchhiker and American Pastoral, where Morrison was set to portray a hitchhiker who embarks on a murderous rampage. Lastly, the first 4 lines of the second verse are very symbolic as well, as Jim Morrison had a longtime girlfriend named Pamela Corson who stood by him throughout his career. He is essentially putting to her in this verse saying, "You gotta love me," despite their unstable relationship. But they were able to stay together regardless of their repeated infidelity. And now for the main reason why it's this high on the ranking. The atmosphere, which is outstanding and well layered. I am immediately hooked into this song once it begins, as I really love the sound of these electric pianos, especially when it goes down the scale of one of my favorite musical modes, the Dorian scale. Yep, music theory coming in clutch once again. And the sound effects of rain and thunder that accompany the track are very nicely integrated, and make the song have a lot of character and stand out more. It's like living in a different world, except it's Jim Morrison and Company's world. To end my discussion on this song off, I can see why this song has remained on classic rock radio playlists and why it got inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame over a decade ago, because this song is absolutely fantastic. And again, the best song they have ever made in my opinion. Now the top 3 in this video are all particularly flawless. I love them all equally to the point where I could have placed them in any order depending on what my mood is. Now let's continue on with the list with... Number 3. Music. Weakling Paradinas. There are some electronic artists that I can truly say are most definitely overlooked, and this is one of them. Enter Mike Paradinas, an underrated IDM legend who is mostly known for his music under Music, and also for working with Aphex Twin under the Mike and Rich name. He also both helped contribute to the IDM scene and define the drill and bass subgenre with albums like Tango Invective, Lunatic Harness, Royal Astronomy, and my personal favorite, Bluff Limbo. But today we're going to zero in on what I believe to be his most underrated album, Chewed Corners. One of his brightest and most melodic albums yet. While it's not better than the early period albums I've just mentioned, I think it's a fun album all the way through with interesting excursions Mike makes along the way. And here we have Weakling Paradinas, the album's closer, and it is absolutely fucking beautiful. Oh my god. The track starts off with a simple kick drum and some very soft and luscious synths that remind me instantly of Orbital's The Girl with the Sun in Her Head from the previous episode, and that's contrasted well with occasional electric guitar sounding melodies. And then for about a minute or so, some more percussion gets added to it over time, including some pretty neat shakers. And then the track just explodes at the 3:14 mark with some even more synths that are much more bombastic this time. Oh my goodness, the amount of power this track has is unreal. And that chord progression is so emotional, I feel like I want to cry to it. And the way the track ends when everything just sizzles to the point where it's left with only some ambient synth pads is amazing. And that in turn reminds me heavily of Rufus Du Sol's Inner Bloom in the best way. What Mike has created is a fantastic example of a late career highlight. And every single little element that goes into this track pretty much speaks for itself in that regard. This is without a shadow of a doubt the best track he has ever made, point blank period. Which, given how much I've adored his classic material in the 90s, that's really saying a lot. Masterpiece, I dare say. Number 2. JeanMichel Jarre, Waiting for Cousteau. And my favorite of all the big 70s synth pioneers strikes again. As you may know, JeanMichel Jarre is a French composer and producer best known for creating albums like Oxygene, which changed the electronic music scene forever. And he's also made other enjoyable projects that showed not only his futuristic outlook, but also his versatility as an artist like Equinox, Zuluk, Oxygene 7-13, Metamorphoses, Oxygene 3, and many others. But here we are, the track that is probably going to be the longest track I am possibly ever going to cover in this series. This track, the closing title track to his 1990 album Waiting for Cousteau, is 46 minutes long. Yep, 46 minutes and 55 seconds in length. I am genuinely not making this shit up. And yet, it is one of the best ambient pieces I have ever heard in the whole history of the genre. There is little to no progression throughout this track at all, and there is an instantly hypnotic quality to this track that I really love. The way the ambient pads slowly drift through the mix, combined with some beautiful pianos that also gel well with these pads, just makes for such a compelling atmosphere. And the occasional sound effects, including some growling noises, really do add on to this track's overall vibes to such an immaculate degree. It honestly makes me feel like I'm floating on a ship while also exploring the wonders of a very dark cave. And yeah, I don't think I have much more to say about this track beyond that. It's just one of the best tracks he's ever made to date. I will understand that the 46-minute long length of this beast is an immediate turnoff for you, but for me, this thing is one hell of a transcendental listening experience that I will, for sure, remember for the rest of my entire life. However, despite all the things that I've said, it does not get the number 1 spot. That honor goes to... And finally, number 1, Pink Floyd, High Hopes. And here's the number 1 that likely only a few of you saw coming. Pink Floyd, as we all know, are a legendary rock band. No denying that. You know what, forget what I said about Yes being arguably the most iconic prog rock band, because I think Pink Floyd have more or less sealed that honor. They have released some classics over the years like Adam Heart Mother, The Dark Side of the Moon, Wish You Were Here, Animals, and The Wall. And while The Division Bell in particular is not one of their more stronger albums in my opinion, I still feel like it's a pretty solid album that is also a bit underrated as well. That said, out of all 11 tracks on this thing, the closer High Hopes is the one that overshadows the rest of the track listing for me. This is easily one of the most powerful and easily resonant songs they have ever came up with. Full stop. Exploring all these themes of nostalgia, regret, and the inevitable end as time runs its course, this truly feels like the real conclusion to the Pink Floyd story. This is presented to us through the lyrics, where in the first verse, David Gilmour is singing about the pastoral images of childhood, as well as the separation of people and getting weighed down by responsibilities if you don't accomplish your dreams. This is especially transparent with these first few lines. Beyond the horizon of the place we lived when we were young, in a world of magnets and miracles, our thoughts strayed constantly and without boundary. The chorus is where it takes a turn for the more hopeful, as the narrator is wistfully remembering better times in their later years, which is a stark contrast to the fairly dark and regretful lyricism of the first verse. According to Genius, this can also be interpreted as David Gilmour and the remaining members of the band at the time yearning for the oldies before Syd Barrett and Roger Waters left. The themes of nostalgia and regret continue in verse 2, where the narrator thinks about the past, but they also know they can't go back, and that's implied by the lines, looking beyond the embers of virgin glowing behind us to a glimpse of how green it was on the other side. Finally, the third verse tells me, you, and everyone else, that notwithstanding all of their accomplishments, there is still an emptiness that remains. The lines, encumbered forever by desire and ambition, there is a hunger still unsatisfied, tell us that they know they've been here before, but their time is all but done. At least for 20 years anyway. So those are the lyrics, and now for the instrumentation, which is absolutely incredible, not to mention enthralling, and fits well with the overall messages Gilmour and company are trying to convey. The way the bells from Fat Old Sun get integrated into the intro reminds me of when the mournful harmonica licks from David Bowie's A New Career in a New Town were cleverly integrated into I Can't Give Everything Away. To further add on to the high praises I have for the song, the piano playing is soulful, Gilmour's vocals match the lyrics super well, all the instruments interplay with each other is also really incredible, and that guitar solo in the second half sounds awesome, and adds on to the unbridled finality of it all. And yeah, that's pretty much everything I have to say on the topic of High Hopes. I adore the instrumentation on this one a ton. I love how the lyrics in the verses contrast with the lyrics in the chorus in a top-notch manner. Literally everything about it is just so incredibly stunning from start to finish that I literally had to put this at the top of the list. I think I'm lost on descriptions of what else I can truly say about this one, other than this is simply incredible and probably my top 3 favorite Pink Floyd songs at this point. Perfect song. And that was my ranking proper. Thanks to everyone who has submitted. It is greatly appreciated, and wow, you guys were on fire with this one. Only 3 songs here where I can say were truly duds. 1 was meh, 2 were decent, and the rest was at least good stuff. I'm just glad no one submitted Strobe, I Can't Give Everything Away, or Comforting Sounds. Otherwise, the competition for this one would have been unfair. Other than that, excellent job once again, everyone. The next episode, episode 23, will be on your favorite colorful songs. The link to the forum for MSR23 will be in the description down below and also in the pinned comments as per usual. And the forum will be closing on Monday, November 6th, 2023 at 3 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. But yeah, I'm pretty much looking forward to seeing how many people submit to this, because favorite colorful songs are basically just your favorite songs with the names of colors in the title. And I'm just really eager to what you guys come up with for this concept. So yeah, submit to the forum if you're interested, links in the description, pinned comments. But yeah, we've made it to the end of the video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, give it a like, share this one with your friends if you want to, and leave a comment down below. And as always, don't forget to subscribe as we're on the road to 9,000 subscribers. That's pretty much it, guys. Thank you for watching, and as always, I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye, guys.